One of the things that readers often ask me is whether I've actually owned all the different animals that appear in my stories. Now, my animal stories series is actually up to book 54 by now, and I sadly haven't owned 54 different cats and dogs, although actually I have had two dogs. I'm counting now. I should have thought about this beforehand. Oh, 6 cats, 12 gerbils, a couple of hamsters, a very beautiful mouse who is called Truffle, stick insects, goldfish. My daughter had a snake for a while. We've owned lots and lots of different pets as a family, and lots of my animals have appeared in my stories. But the animals in my books are often inspired by news stories, by stories about friends' different animals, and sometimes from just, strange places, or somebody will tell me a brilliant story about a dog or a cat. So my most recent book was actually published yesterday. It's called the Railway Kitten. And this is the story of a kitten called Whiskers. But Whiskers is actually based on a real cat. And the real cat's name is Fanny, and she lives at Gypsy Hill Station in South London. So Fanny is a real station cat, or a railway kitten, and her story is lovely but also a little bit sad. She has been spending loads of time at Gypsy Hill Station for years, and she has her own house, but she loves to walk down to the station and get lots and lots of fuss and attention from the people there to catch their trains. And all the commuters who see her every day really, really love her. A few years ago, she was actually in a car accident. She was hit by a car, and she needed a really tricky and quite expensive operation to help her get better. And her owners were really struggling to find the money for it. So they set up a crowdfunder. And because she was so well known in the local community, the crowdfunder was actually completed. They raised all the money in less than an hour, which was just such a brilliant story. And in fact, it was my agent, Julia, who told me about Fanny. And she told me that there was this lovely station cat at Gypsy Hill Station. And it wasn't until a few years later that she told me again about Fanny and about this horrible accident that she'd had, but also that she'd recovered partly because of this wonderful fundraising. And I really knew that I wanted to write that story about how a community came together to look after this very special cat. So I turned the story into the Railway Kitten. Now, obviously, my story is a bit different to the original. For a start, I've given Fanny a different name. She's called Whiskers. But also because I wanted to put child characters into the story. So the main character is called Scarlet, and Scarlet is the one who finds Whiskers after she's been hit by a car. So it just gives you a little bit of an idea about how real animals sometimes end up in my stories. But also, I do sometimes write books that are directly inspired by my own animals, and this is one of those. This is the Homesick Kitten, which is about my cat Sammy. Sammy was a really beautiful silver tabby, very much like the illustration on the front cover. All of my illustrations, just while I think about it, are by the absolutely brilliant Sophie Williams. She does the covers, and she also does the beautiful inside illustrations as well. She is really fantastic. Just wanted to put a quick plug in there for Sophie. So Sammy was a very beautiful cat that my husband and I got when we moved into our first house together. And Sammy really loved our house. He loved the garden particularly because there were lots of big trees at the end of the garden, and that was like his territory. And he was absolutely furious when a few years after we got him, we moved house. And this book is all about a cat who doesn't understand why suddenly he's been taken away from his space, his lovely house and his lovely garden, and made to go and live somewhere else. He doesn't like it at all. So what actually happened to Sammy was that when we took him to the new house, he kept trying to run away. And because we'd not moved very far away from our old house, he could quite easily work out how to get back home. The big problem was that there was quite a large, busy road in between the two houses. So obviously we were really worried about him trying to cross that busy road. Cats are very, very clever, but they are not good at roads because they're really, really bad at judging how fast cars are going. especially in early mornings and evenings when actually cats quite like to be about. So we were trying really hard to stop Sammy going back to our old house, and we kept trying to keep him in and feed him all his favourite foods to convince him to stay in the new house, and it kept on not working. And then eventually Sammy actually disappeared, and we were really devastated because we thought maybe he had been hit by a car. So we put out posters, we rang up all the vets, we went out searching and calling for him, and there was no sign. And after a few weeks of searching, we actually started to give up. And then, about 3 months after Sammy had disappeared, I got a phone call from a vet in the next village to us saying, "We've got your cat." And what had happened was that somebody had found Sammy and they'd taken him to an animal shelter. And the animal shelter had given him to a new family to take home. Now, the problem was that Sammy was microchipped. Because when we'd first got him, we'd had him microchipped. Now this all happened about 20 years ago, so a really long time ago. And that was quite early on in the kind of the development of the microchip technology. So not that many cats were microchipped. So the shelter where he'd been found, they didn't scan him because it wasn't particularly well-known technology at the time. But the vet, when the new family took him to the vet for a checkup and also to ask the vet to put in a microchip for him, the vet said, "Oh, he's already got one." And he scanned Sammy, and of course our name and address came up on his microchip. And that meant officially he still belonged to us. But this new family thought that he belonged to them. So the vet was on the phone to me saying, "So I've got your cat. Do you want to come and get him? Or should I let this new family keep him?" And that was a really, really hard decision because I loved Sammy and I desperately wanted him back. But I knew that if we brought him back to our new house, he would probably do exactly the same thing again. So even though I really loved him and he was my funny, silly companion cat who liked to ride on my shoulder and he was really cuddly and lovely, I knew that it was actually better to let the new family keep him. And it was one of those really, really sad moments where you have to make a decision that you don't really want to make. But actually, you can probably see that as a writer who writes books about animals and about people and about the best way to take care of your animals, it was actually a really, it seems a sad way to put it, but it seems like a useful thing to have happened. It gave me experience of those emotions and how to think about them. So it has been really, really a good experience for me as a writer, even though it was a horrible thing to happen. And actually one of the things that shows what a horrible thing it was to happen is that it's taken me nearly 20 years to write this book because I kind of hated thinking about how we had to say goodbye to him, and it's taken me a long time to feel able to write the book. But actually for me it was a really special way to think about that memory because I was able to change the end of the story, because that's what you can do as a writer. You can make stories come out the way you want to. So spoilers, but it does have a happy ending, and the main character, who's in this book, is called Harper. Harper does not have to say goodbye to Sammy at the end of the story.